UK government declared a climate and ecological emergency. What was that word? Emergency. I can't hear you. Emergency! So why is this emergency not reflected in the media's coverage? It is an emergency. Emergency. We demand that the media tell the truth about the severity of the climate and ecological crisis. We demand that the media prioritise the reporting of the climate crisis. We demand that the climate crisis be top of the agenda, lead story, front page news, not relegated to a token afterthought. The truth will always come out in the end, but we can't afford to wait any longer. The time is running out for us to change. The emergency is now. We need to act now, so tell us the truth. To show you the two alternative paths that we have the option at this very moment to go down. Tell the Truth Media will be presenting two alternative futures. One for the positive future, in which we took action now, in which we backed the climate and ecological emergency bill. We will then present the news from the negative future.
From Cardiff on the 3rd of September 2050.
Today's top story: the UK has reached its highest employment figures ever thanks to further green investment by the government.
Yes, Gwenny, that's right. Today also marks 30 years since the first citizens' assemblies were set up to fairly empower citizens to take the lead on our country's climate decisions. We will be outlining their positive impact on society and ask why they weren't set up before 2020.
And another bit of good news in today: it has been announced that the UK rewilding scheme, encouraged by the 2025 Citizen Assemblies, has successfully increased the population of thousands of animals and plants, with a common hedgehog benefiting the most. There are now over 10,000 roaming freely here in Wales, a massive increase since its near extinction in 2020.
And today, in sports, we look forward to the next Olympic Games in 2052 to be held in India. Their first game since their move to over 80% renewable power. It's set to be the greenest Olympics in history. Also in sport today, international rugby and league football returned this weekend, but not with the bang you would expect, with the match in the Millennium Stadium being just one of the 20 matches called off due to flooding. In today's weather, Storm Daisy caused large-scale disruption across the UK, with the Rhondda Valley most affected. As those with flooded properties are unable to be insured, we ask, what should we be prepared for next?
But back to our top story. Employment has reached its highest figure since records began. A remarkable recovery given the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic, which destroyed economies across the world. Here's Matt to give you a summary of how we got here.
Thank you, Gwenny. I think we all know this, but I'm going to say two words which helped this recovery start and transform into a blossoming society for all. Those two words are citizens' assemblies. As we said earlier, this week marks 30 years since the first UK Citizens' Assembly was set up. And oh boy, did that help us. In 2020, the first Citizens' Assembly made up of 100 people from all walks of life, equally representing every member of society, was put straight into action after the Climate and Ecological Emergency Bill, or the CEE Bill as it was commonly referred to, was enshrined into UK law by Parliament. They got straight to work, and with expert guidance, by the end of 2020, we had a year plan of how to recover in the fairest and greenest way possible from the COVID-19 recession.
What they decided in 2020 was that HS2 should be instantly scrapped. As the £100 billion saved was to be used to invest in different forms of renewable energy, which then created over 100,000 jobs directly and supported thousands of companies indirectly across the UK. They also implemented a mass retraining scheme, which up to this date has helped to retrain and re-employ over 10 million people into green and sustainable industries.
And let's not forget that because of the success we saw here in the UK, other nations across the world follow our example and implemented their own citizens' assemblies. Following their recommendations, they invested in green industries and reduced their dependence on fossil fuels. As a result, global greenhouse gas emissions have fallen by nearly 50%, helping us stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius of global heating.
Thanks, Gwenny. Now for some breaking news. At the opening of the Convention on Biological Diversity in Switzerland this morning, it was announced that the global rate of species extinction has reduced from 1,000 times above the normal rate of extinction in 2020 to now only 100 times above the normal rate. A huge achievement and further step towards ecological improvement. Over to you, Gareth.
Thanks, Matt, and thank you to all of the people who have been part of the UK Citizens' Assemblies over the last 30 years. You have truly helped this society to develop to a better place. Over the last 3 decades, India has made one of the biggest transformations to a sustainable society in the world. After following by Britain's example and implementing citizens' assemblies to combat some of the biggest issues, India will now host the 2052 Olympic Games. The Indian government has pledged that the Games will be run on over 90% renewable power, the highest total for a Games in history, truly breaking the boundaries of what we thought was possible. In other sports news, over 75 professional sports games were called off due to Storm Daisy. If these severe storms continue, what does this mean for professional football and sport in general? Well, clubs may have to relocate to less flood-prone areas. Even with the vast sums of money in football, teams such as Manchester United, Hull, Cardiff City are all thinking of relocating due to flooding, postponing over 15 of their games last season. This really is a major concern for many clubs and could cost them billions of pounds.
And others stopping house insurance across the country. UK house owners are now completely vulnerable to these storm events. Therefore, the government has stepped in to offer support. At the news at 5 later today, we'll be hearing from Mrs. Catherine Jones from Pontypridd, one of the worst hit areas here in Wales. Over to you, Gwenny.
Thank you, Matt. And to round up the news today on September the 3rd, 2050, we are heading in a positive direction globally. We are still getting some of the effects of the rising temperatures, but we are in a great position moving into the future. We'll see you next time.
Thank you very much, Tell the Truth Media. That was the news from a positive future in which we still have storm events and mass flooding, yet we have improved our society with citizens' assemblies by backing the CEE bill now. If you think those storms sounded bad, wait until you hear the negative future if we don't do anything and we don't act now. I present you with the news from a negative 2050 future.
Helo a chroeso I raglen Dwedwch y Gwir gyda ni Gwrth Ryfel Dyfodiant. Hello, and welcome to Tell the Truth News, hosted by us, Extinction Rebellion.
We come to you today live from Cardiff on the 3rd of September 2050.
Today's top story. We have now officially reached 2 degrees of global heating since pre-industrial times. Experts say that this will cause a chain of global irreversible tipping points, meaning we will reach 3 degrees by 2100. But what does reaching 2 degrees heating actually mean?
Well, Gwenny, the sea level has finally risen by 50 centimetres globally, meaning large areas of the UK are now underwater, with thousands of Brits losing their life savings being made permanently homeless. The total cost to the UK from sea level rise so far is estimated at around £800 billion. In Wales,
Due to unpredictable weather this year, over 60% of crops have now been destroyed. These restrictions, or rationing as some people might call it, have had to be placed on surveying vessels. Due to extreme heat and strong summers faced by farmers across the world, we have not seen fruits like bananas and mangoes for 1 year. So, who knows what we
Thank you very much. These are the two paths that we are faced with. A road to destruction or a path to redemption. The choices we make now decide our future. This is why we urge you to demand that your MP backs the Climate and Ecological Emergency Bill, the CEE bill. And is why we are calling for the media to tell the truth about the severity of the climate and ecological emergency declared by the Welsh and UK governments. We will now take a 10 to 15 minute break where the Samba will have a little jam, and then we will come back with a panel show with scientific and media experts, as well as giving you, the audience, the chance to voice your views and concerns about the media's coverage of the climate emergency. Take it away, Samba. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Tell the Truth Media with me, your host, Lang. Today I will be joined by two expert guests in the fields of science and media, and we will be talking about the media's coverage of the climate and ecological emergency. Before I begin, I asked the BBC to attend today. So is anyone from the BBC here to speak to us about telling the truth? BBC, are you here? No one. Okay. So I asked the media, the BBC, a few questions before today because I didn't think they would turn up. I will read to you some of the main questions so you can get a feel for why they didn't answer. Given that the possible impacts of runaway climate change are devastating both globally and locally here in Wales, why is the climate emergency, as declared by the UK and Welsh governments, not BBC Cymru Wales's top editorial priority? They didn't answer. As the BBC is a publicly funded organisation and the UK and Welsh governments have declared a climate emergency, would the BBC like to collaborate on a People's Assembly to discuss their future coverage of the climate crisis? They did not answer that. Why has the BBC not declared
a climate emergency? Does anyone know? No response. Given the eminent broadcasting coverage of COVID-19 due to health risks faced by the public, does BBC Cymru Wales believe the climate emergency should be reported on as a top priority given the extensive health and livelihood threats to be faced by the Welsh and UK people of this planet? No response. And finally, what does BBC Cymru Wales plan to do in the future to help cover the climate emergency? What do you plan to do? No response. I will now read you a statement from the BBC that they sent to me today. BBC Wales covers many climate change and environmental issues across a range of programmes. We know how important these issues are to our audiences, and we continue to focus on them with our programmes such as YOLO, Saving the Land of the Wild, Our Lives, Saving Our Eco-Village, and multi-platform news coverage, whilst internally doing all we can to lead the way in promoting sustainability in the media industry. BBC Wales' new broadcasting centre, right behind me, at Central Square, has been awarded a BREEAM. New construction rating, outstanding, the highest level of sustainability, a massive concrete building in the middle of a centre with no green around it, highest level of sustainability. I think this shows the BBC's level of commitment to the climate emergency. We have two futures which we presented to you earlier. It's not enough just to have a few programs here and there talking about the environment, talking about the great lands that we have. It's got to be front page. It's got to be straight to us. Programs need to focus on this and need to lead by an example. Thank you, thank you. So my first guest today is Dr. Catherine Walsh, an academic who lectures in journalism, media and culture department at Cardiff University. Please give a big round of applause for Dr. Catherine Walsh. Hello.
Hi there. I was doing some DIY at home this morning before I came here, and this is more or less what I did, so this will be fine. I know this will be fine, because I did something just like this morning. This will be fine.
So I gather you recently researched the press coverage of of Extinction Rebellion. Is that right?
I've seen some, yeah, a bit, yeah, for sure. So, so I've been, what I used to research, and I still research a bit, is actually more around money and politics. So I'm a lecturer in political communication. Just in the building behind you here, actually, is where I work. And I've been doing that for several years, and particularly interested in money and where money kind of meets politics. But lately I've gotten interested in Extinction Rebellion, and it's funny because when I started my academic career years ago, what was happening then was Occupy, with which you share. I know some of you were children when that was happening, or maybe not even around at all. But Occupy was, again, people asking for, saying the world is not working and we'd like it to be different so that everyone's better off. And in that sense, Extinction Rebellion, I think, is very much like that. And it reminds me of it very much. So I became interested in it, and in the last year or so, I've been looking with another colleague of mine in Germany, and we've been looking at a bit about the press coverage and looking at how other people have studied it as well.
So how does the press usually tend to cover environmental movements?
So I think there's two things to think about there. There's quantity and there's sort of quality. And the first thing to think about is quantity. That's a bit easier to measure. Even that's tough, because if you think about it, you've got newspapers, and maybe you could count the words or count the articles. Then you've got what's going on TV or broadcast. Well, maybe we time it and see how long segments last. And so in a sense, there's two messages in terms of, how are we better heard and how do we make a greater impact? When you think about it, you've probably actually got two audiences. From the polling I've seen, a lot of people do generally agree with a lot of the aims that you have. but as a group you're still quite small. Now that doesn't mean small groups can't accomplish a lot, and I think Extinction Rebellion was founded on the idea that small groups could. But actually a small group of people who felt very strongly and were very strategic and non-violent about what they were doing could accomplish a lot. I think you always need to think about your audience, though. A big audience for a demonstration like this, frankly, are the journalists who will cover it. There are lots of people who are on their way to the station who will see us today, and that's great. But for this to go beyond the station, of course, it needs to have these images that people want to send out. It needs to have this clear sort of message, and it needs to make the news. I think Extinction Rebellion itself feels that their very first rebellion was covered more than their second, and in part that's because of just novelty. One of the things journalists look for is it new? And the first time this massive demonstration hit the streets, it was very new and blocked stuff and occupied places. It was very new. And later, you know, it's still interesting, but maybe a little less, and you're always trying to up that ante to try to capture attention. I think it would be a good idea to think about, you know, all those people who generally agree with you but are kind of trying to get on with their day, what they might need to hear. And then there's a different thing entirely, which is those few hundred people who decide whether or not you get your bill. And they're a different kettle of fish entirely.
So do you think the media portrays the climate emergency as a true reality, or do you think there is still climate skepticism within the media?
I think there's less of that than there used to be. I mean, I can't swear to this. From the research I've seen that, not me, but other people have done the last few years, I would say that it looks like climate skepticism, sort of in the press anyway, and I'm talking about newspapers, seems to have kind of, I would say, peaked. It looks to me like that, although, you know, you could get another academic who came up and said, no, I found lots of instances. But that sort of thing where, you know, there are a lot of climate deniers and they're getting lots of editorial time and stuff. It's not that never happens anymore, but I think a lot of people have kind of come along. That doesn't mean that's not happening online. It's really hard to measure what's happening online. Where do you start? Everybody sees a different Twitter feed. Some people are on Instagram, some people aren't. Very, very difficult to measure what's happening online. So
which news outlets do you think has some of the better coverage?
Well, better means sort of more as XR
more
would like.
More thorough coverage.
Oh, more. Okay, now they're two different questions in a way. So, what I think is probably most sympathetic to you probably is The Guardian, actually, is my guess. It's not entirely a guess. I've seen a little bit of data around that as well. When you think about it, Guardian readership and Guardian writers share a general demographic with a lot of people who support Extinction Rebellion. So, but the big thing about the Guardian is that they have a declared editorial policy about it. So if you go on the Guardian website and you look, they've decided that this is one of the things, this is sort of one of the campaigns they're going to care about. So they're probably most firmly toward you. But that wasn't exactly the question as I heard it, because there's that, and then there's the best coverage. One of the ongoing problems with journalism in general, and there's widespread agreement on this, and it's not just you guys, it's anybody who's got a complex cause. What a complex cause, what a complex idea. Everything you're talking about is about the future, it's about the economy, it's about buildings, infrastructure, the way we eat, the way we travel. It's a massive, complex problem, much of which belongs in the future, and nobody knows the future. How many of you thought you'd all be wearing face masks a year ago? Right?
Not me.
Ooh, exactly. Frankly, people in 2007 didn't know what 2008 would look like. Nobody in 2000 knew how much we'd be talking about terrorism the second half of 2001. Nobody knows the future. So that's one of the problems, is that it's very, you know, this is all really complex, and it's all in the future. So it's really hard to cover. Like, if you're terms of talking about what would good coverage be? Well, I guess that would be kind of long-form journalism, the long read, that kind of stuff. That stuff's great, we like it when we see it, but it's not what most of journalism is made of. Most of journalism is tight deadlines, one guy with a camera running around, or one woman with a camera running around, trying to get a story quickly, turn it back to their boss.
So do you think, for most media outlets, money is the driver and the audience is key?
Largely, yeah. The audience is always...
Therefore, would we need to change the public's perception and try and change who they're going to for their media, rather than maybe trying to change the media?
Yeah, I mean, good luck changing the media. That's a massive institution. That's big. You know, I was saying this morning I was doing DIY. I had to level the dishwasher, level some countertops. I don't know if anyone's ever done that. When you level things, you know how you raise one leg and it messes up what's gone on the other leg? You can kind of think of society like that in a way. Public opinion and changes in public opinion and changes in the way we discuss things are always hard fought and hard won. And there's going to be no magic button. We'll change the media and it'll be different. We'll change people's opinions and it'll be different. It's all going to be by increments. Every social movement has always found that. As far as the coverage goes, you can understand that journalists themselves are working with their sort of the way they cover things. They're working with their own constraints. Their editors are telling them what to do. The audience wants something else. There's a profit motive behind most of it. We talked about the BBC. Of course, they're paid for by the license fee. And so you guys kind of feel like you should cover us the right way because the public pays for you, and this is important to the public.
So therefore, do we, as Extinction Rebellion, as protesters, need to demand from our media organisations directly, depending on the programming, demand that the climate emergency and climate-related issues are put into the programming, are made top priority? Do we need to complain to them? Do we need to massively complain to these companies and say, we're really not happy with this, writing letters? Would that make any difference?
I don't know how successful the letter writing campaign it might be. I mean, groups like Amnesty have worked off letter writing for a really long time. It's a way you can do things. And of course now people can tweet their complaints and all that kind of stuff too. You can complain. There absolutely is no silver bullet. The BBC has a license fee. Almost everything else has to pay the bills basically by ad revenue. It's not what you pay. Lord knows on the internet you're paying. I'm sure most of you paying nothing. It all runs on ad revenue, and frankly it always did. So that's also part of it as well. I mean, the people who sell you stuff are the people who pay for your media. And if part of your message is anti-consumerism, it's one of the most fascinating things about XR, why I watch it so carefully, is that, the people who pay for the media are doing it to sell you stuff. And one of the main messages of XR is stop buying stuff. Wow, I do not have an answer for you. Wow, it's tough. One of the things I think, and this is one of the ways in which XR shares a lot of, has a lot in common with earlier movements, is this really strong moral sense that I know a lot of you carry. And I feel it as well, that, this is something we need to do for our kids and our grandkids, and because it's the right thing to do, and the birds and the bees and all that. And of course, the people who are making decisions in media, and a lot of the general public, just think about things slightly differently in more bread and butter terms. And I think probably more thought has to kind of be put behind that. I didn't come with any answers. I hope nobody thought I came with answers. Did not come with answers, but
Right.
Things to think about.
That was a very nice conversation that we had. I would like to finish there and thank Dr. Catherine Walsh.
No worries.
Yes.
Now
Thank
to
you very
get
much.
down safely. To get down safely.
The samba band is now going to start, and we're going to try and move everyone to the other side. So if we can get everyone to move around to the other side for a reason which you might understand in a minute, please could we just get you to move over there, and we will be back in a brief moment. After that, we will have audience participation where you can have your chance to say how you feel about the media's coverage of the climate emergency.
Coronavirus has shown us that the media can do things differently. They can push a health emergency to the top of the editorial priority. So why not do that with the climate crisis? Media companies paint their own versions of reality for their own agenda, whatever that may be. It is not only the responsibility of environmentalists to protect our planet. This emergency will affect us all, regardless of who we are or where we come from. This affects us all. The truth. Tell the truth. Tell the truth. We therefore need to know the truth so we can act accordingly. in a way that reflects the likely disastrous consequences of runaway climate change that we have presented to you today. This is why we demand the media to tell the truth. 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 I will now invite my next guest, Dr. Aaron Thierry, an ecologist, that's the one, and a proud member of Scientists for Extinction Rebellion. Please welcome Dr. Aaron Thierry to the stage. Hello everybody. Lovely to see you all here today. Thank you for coming. So I'm going to get straight into it. Do you think the general public are ill-informed about the real impact of the climate emergency?
Yes. I'm afraid so. I think both the severity and urgency and scale of the crisis is not properly understood by the majority.
How do you think the press or the media should be better covering the climate emergency so people understand the full severity and the things that they should be commanding?
Okay, so I think it's quite a lot like you just said, Lang, which is, we've seen what coverage of an emergency looks like with the coronavirus pandemic, right? We've seen that it's on the headlines every single day. We've seen that journalists are talking about it as something that we're all having to work towards solving, right? There's no debate about it, there's no confusion about it, it's what do we have to do? And it's often very clear instructions, right? Make sure you're wearing a mask, make sure you're washing your hands, make sure you're social distancing. The messaging is really clear. Everybody gets that there's an urgency, that there's an emergency. We have statistics that are told to us daily about how many people are dying, how many people are being treated, what are we actually doing, right? That's what coverage of a crisis looks like. I would say yes. I think probably as a whole institution rather than particular groups or individuals. I think there's been a massive, we have to really understand, okay, that there's been a massive misinformation campaign carried out by vested interests, and this has all been very well documented by academics, by social scientists, by scholars of journalism, to show the way in which the fossil fuel companies in particular, but also other large industries, have basically paid for talking heads to go up on TV and can just say that, the science isn't settled, there's uncertainty, we don't know how serious it's going to be, right? And this is then picked up by journalists who create this kind of false balance in the debate. And they put up a scientist, like myself, who's spent for decades, for years in doing the research, understanding what the science says, and then they put them up against one of these PR spin doctors who's trained all their lives to kind of just spin the truth and make up things and make them sound convincing, and then they leave it up to the public to decide what's actually happening. And that's then created this huge confusion for a really long time. I mean, again, you talked about it a bit earlier about the climate deniers and climate skeptics kind of being really part of the debate. And unfortunately, I would say the BBC was one of the worst at this, because for a really long time they kept inviting climate deniers, like Nigel Lawson from the Global Warming Policy Foundation, and put them on the Today programme or Newsnight or whatever, and treated them as though that their opinion was equal to that of the overwhelming majority of climate scientists. And that fossil fuel industry has managed to delay action on climate change by 40 years. And if we carry on letting them do it, they'll delay it until it's a disaster. It already is disaster, but it's catastrophe, right? And I think the key point is that climate denial is morphing, right? It used to be outright rejection that the world was warming, or that we were causing it. And that's not really possible anymore. The facts are just too obvious. They're staring us in the face. And I think that's one way in which scientists can and have been trying to raise the awareness about this. And I think, if you look at the reports, they've been getting more and more alarming, and the language has been getting stronger and stronger, saying, we need urgent, radical, transformative action. And and that we're kind of running out of time, and that's been really clear about all of these reports saying it's getting later and later and later in the day to act. So that's one way. But then I think there's another way, which is like I'm doing here right now, which is actually as a citizen, as a human who knows about this issue perhaps more than most people, getting out on the streets and actually showing people how concerned and alarmed I am about this, and actually saying that I can't sit at home knowing that the fate of things that people I love, species I love, places I love, values I hold dear, like freedom and democracy, are at risk because our government and our media refuse to tell the truth about these things and refuse to act with the seriousness that's needed. So that's why I'm here alongside you all today in solidarity, and I'm not going to go home until we get action. Come on everyone,
Thank you. I'll move on now. It's really important to get different views on this issue. So I'm going to present the audience, you lot out there, with a statement. And if you would like to comment on this statement directly, then I'll give you a chance to talk on the microphone from a limited time so we can try and get different voices heard and not going on for too long. So this is the statement. Please react to it as you will. The media isn't doing enough to tell the truth about the urgent climate emergency. What are your views? So if you would like to talk about this, please come behind the stage and we will get a little chat going and a debate. If we could have possible some samba whilst we just get everything set up.